Hello again, veterans. Rick Seaman here with 11 Bravo. We are all about the combat vets. Today I have a very interesting gentleman with me, a fellow named Sean Hughes. Sean, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here. Thank you, Rick.
And thanks for your service and welcome home.
Thank you, sir.
So Sean was a Marine, served in Iraq. What outfit in Iraq were you with?
I was with 2nd Light Armor Reconnaissance Battalion. It's 2nd Mardiv, and was there as part of the invasion in 2003.
So you got there to take old Saddam down, huh?
That was I guess the point.
That was the point.
They found him in a hole a few months after
right.
I got back to the States. So.
Okay. But you got him running into the hole at least, right?
Yeah. I was part of that effort. Yes, sir.
Good. Yes, sir. So what made you want to be a Marine? Because you joined right when did you join? Before or after 9/11?
Well, September 11th is why I decided to join the Marine Corps.
That's it. Okay.
And I grew up in theater, so it's probably a little bit of a different route than most guys take, to lead them into the Marine Corps and
Right.
the infantry field. But so I was out here in LA. I was pursuing a career as an actor, and when September 11th happened, the next day I went down to the recruiting station. I don't even believe it's there anymore, but it was the Hollywood recruiting station at Sunset and La Brea.
Okay.
And I was at a MEP station that weekend, and a few weeks later I was down in San Diego being yelled at by drill instructors going, what the hell did I get myself into?
There you go.
But,
So you said you came out here. Where are you from?
I was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, had you done any theater stuff back there? I mean,
I got started as a kid when I was about 7 years
I was
old.
just going to say, you probably got started at a pretty young age.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So you decided to take that career, bring it out to Hollywood, hit the big time. Right?
Exactly. My day job paid the bills, but it paid the bills pretty well. I wasn't getting as much work as I would have liked, but I'm sure that there are probably several actors here in town that could say the same thing.
Sure.
But yeah, I was going after the only thing I'd ever wanted to do, but I just felt when I saw my nation under attack that it was the only choice for me.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on that? I mean, you say you went to the recruiter on September 12th, the very next day. So it didn't take more than a day to think about it.
No, and who knows, if I'd taken more than a day to think about it, I may have made a different decision.
True.
I think like all Americans felt, at that time, certainly enraged to see something like that happen to our country on our soil. But also, there was, I think a lot of us felt very vulnerable for the first time. For my generation, the first time I think we had ever felt vulnerable to attack.
Right.
And, I also felt called to serve. I mean, without having ever been in the service prior to that, I certainly considered myself to be a patriot, and
Right.
It's one thing to give lip service to it; it's another thing to actually put something on the line for your country, and I felt that it was the right time to put something on the line.
Right. Because when you were out here pursuing the acting career, you probably had no desire at all to join the military, did you?
It's never.
Crossed your mind?
If you told me on September 10th, 2001, that 2 days later I was going to be at a recruiter station,
Right.
I would have asked you what you were smoking.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
About patriotism. About going to take care of business. This is 11 Bravo, and we'll be right back. Eleven Bravo, we are back with Sean Hughes. So Sean, you were with an armor outfit over in
2nd Light Armor Reconnaissance.
Light Armor Reconnaissance. What was a day in armor reconnaissance like over there? What was a day at the office like?
I was there as part of the invasion. I mean, I guess the first real action we encountered was just a couple days into the war, and that was in Nasiriyah. And we ended up pushing. I mean, from coming in from Kuwait, we were all the way up into Tikrit before we started working our way back down towards Kuwait to exit theater. It's a day in the life of LAR. I think probably similar to a lot of guys that have been in combat. I mean, you're hooking and jabbing, or you're moving.
Right.
And I guess that was the extent of it. I mean, there were a lot of encounters. It was a steady push north, and and so that was really a big part of it. Kind of the and finding that balance, because you have such an adrenaline rush as you go into a new village or town, and you take fire or whatever, and then it might be 2 or 3 days, and there's just a lag. I mean, you're just the miles. I mean, you just put as you're pushing north, and so that was it was tedious at times, I guess.
When you made contact, was it usually small arms fire, or was it an IED going off, or both? Or
we didn't encounter IEDs. This was during the invasion, and that was the IEDs were kind of the timeline. Really kind of came in later on in the summer. After we had actually started drawing down forces, and so it was like as we started drawing down forces, insurgency started to kind of fill that vacuum, I think.
Right.
And that's when a lot of the IED attacks started. So what we were encountering mainly was small arms fire, AK-47s, RPGs, that type of thing.
So you were pretty much engaged with the elements of Saddam's military.
Remnants of the Iraqi army. I think we certainly ran into some Fedayeen and things like that. Republican Guard, but the majority. I mean, the majority of Saddam's standing army. They just didn't put up much of a fight. I mean, they were. I don't think they were a very motivated enemy.
Right. Maybe they were smart not to put up a fight against you guys. Huh?
Well, I mean, conventional, and there's not another military force out there, I think, that can handle what we bring in a conventional war, which is, I think, why you've seen this insurgency that's rising in Iraq, really adapting to that and coming up with some pretty innovative ways to come at us. They know they can't. They don't want to draw a line in the sand and say, let's go head up, and they don't.
On an average week, how many days a week do you think you made contact on an average? Or did it come in longer lulls and
I guess first, trying to think. I mean, anytime as you're pushing up north, and they made the decision, obviously, to take use the existing roads and things like that were there, instead of us pushing off. I mean, it's an 8-wheel drive vehicle. We could have easily gone through on the sand, but they made the decision, I guess, for time's sake, to use the roads that that were there, already there. So you're going through villages, you're going through towns, and inevitably every time you do that, someone's popping a shot or two off at you, and it's really it put us in a really difficult position, because there were a lot of non-combatants as you're going through. There were a lot of civilians, and so you're put in some pretty awkward positions there, because you're taking fire from a general direction, you're not sure where, and there's a lot of civilians between you and where you're taking fire from.
Right. And you guys worked hard to minimize civilian casualties.
I mean, I would say that I can't imagine that anybody in my unit would intentionally target civilians. I mean, that's not what we're trained to do. Unfortunately, it's urban warfare, and that is that's something that that it's not what we're really trained to do, to the extent that we're fighting it in Iraq, and so I mean, I think you take every necessary precaution, but you certainly have to place a value in your own troop welfare and mission accomplishment. Unfortunately, that has to supersede the lives of civilians.
Absolutely. And I mean, in Vietnam we had the same thing, and all the American public seemed to hear was that very small percentage of oops, some civilians got killed, or there was several cases where some GIs just went off, and we had things called the My Lai massacre and that type of thing. But I mean, I believe, as I believed then and I believe now, that You guys over there, if when it happens, it's not a regular thing. It's an aberration.
I think intentionally targeting civilians would be an anomaly. Something that's certainly not the norm. I think, unfortunately, the Iraqi civilian population is paying the heaviest toll because of this war, and it's because the enemy is choosing to target them, and the enemy also chooses to engage U.S. forces in a civilian environment, in that urban warfare.
So they're in a sense using them for shields.
Yeah.
Even if it's not a military shield, it becomes a political shield.
It becomes a political shield. It's certainly bad PR for us
Exactly.
when
Exactly.
you have to engage an enemy, and unfortunately civilians are caught in the crossfire, and that's how I believe how the insurgency, how they recruit, and how they lessen and diminish the support that the U.S. forces would have in that region.
Sure. They're doing anything and everything they can.
And they're effective.
Yeah.
And they're very effective.
It works.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. We will be right back. 11 Bravo. We are back, 11 Bravo, with my guest, Sean Hughes. So, Sean, Iraq, we hear a lot where it's said that in Iraq there's no rear. In Vietnam, there was a rear. And in most other wars, there was always a rear. In Iraq, you could be in a combat situation, combat area, combat exposure, pretty much wherever you go and whoever you are.
Yeah.
Well, have you seen that?
Without a doubt. Iraq is the battlefield. The
Right.
entire country is the battlefield.
Yeah.
So whether you're out on a patrol or if you're at one of the operating bases, you are at risk. There's never a point when if you were in Iraq, you're at risk. Mm-hmm. So there's never a point where you could come back in off patrol and decompress. And I think that's unprecedented for the American service member.
Yeah. We had rear areas in Vietnam, which I never saw, but they get rocketed, they get mortared. But I think it's different in Iraq because you got a guy driving down the road with a car bomb.
Guy driving down the road with a car bomb. Somebody that's working at the civilian local or whatever. That's working at a chow hall at one of your bases. Like what happened in Mosul. Where they blew up the chow hall. You never know when or where it's going to come at you, and unless you're a VIP hanging out in the green zone, you're at risk.
Mm-hmm. And these insurgents, these terrorists, they're smart.
Oh, without a doubt. That's one of the things that we experienced even during the invasion phase. Is our enemy is effective. They are undermanned. They're outgunned. All right. That's not disputed.
Right.
But they are intelligent. They are crafty. Even making basic decisions. I know like when we were over there as a battalion, you're rolling through in battalion force, through one of these villages or towns, and Alpha Company, one of the line companies, rolls straight through, no problems, nobody engages. Bravo Company goes in, no problems, nobody engages. And then our headquarters and service, H&S,
mm-hmm.
they start coming through with your 7-ton vehicles, your light skin Humvees, and medical and everything, supply. All those guys start rolling through, and that's who the enemy chooses to engage, and it makes sense. If I'm choosing between engaging 25 millimeter Bushmaster machine guns or a 7-ton truck that may have be firing a 240 at me with 7.62 rounds. I'm going to go after the one who's only going to hit me with the 240, and that's what they do. And I think that they have shown a resiliency that none of the planners really counted on.
So they get the mentality of a cheetah or a tiger. It's like, here comes an elephant, I'll let him go. Here comes a rhinoceros, I'll let him go.
But when that gazelle gets
There's
there,
a gazelle.
Yeah.
Sure. Another thing, Sean, we're comparing a little bit here with Vietnam and Iraq, is what came out of Vietnam. I think the biggest fallout that came out of the Vietnam War was Agent Orange. It's still going on. Due to chemical exposure, to dioxin, of course. In Iraq, do you see, like, what's our next Agent Orange going to be? What should we be looking out for?
Sure. I mean, I think there are a couple of things. I mean, I think that we really need to do some extensive studies into the use of depleted uranium rounds, and what the exposure to DU for the American service member is, and because it is. I mean, look, it's a carcinogen. I mean, the exposure to that. Well, what DU does is it gives you the ability to penetrate armor. I mean, heavy armor. So it's certainly from a engaging the enemy perspective, it's certainly an asset. And I don't dispute that. I think what we have to look at to an extent is the risk versus reward. And the risk is that you are exposing the American service member to something that causes cancer.
Exactly.
So I think that we really do need to study the effects of DU and look at how commonly commonly it's being used. And I would hope that the DoD would be forthcoming and with their information about the increased diagnosis of cancer and stuff like that, particularly from troops that have been directly exposed to DU for sustained periods. The other is the psychological trauma of always being on. Like we talked about it a little bit earlier, that there is no rear. If you were in Iraq, you're in a war zone. 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, you're at risk. And I think that's why you're seeing the percentages of troops that are suffering from extreme depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and PTSD is without a doubt, I think, is something that's going to be touching a large percentage of the troops that have served in Iraq. And Steve Robinson, who's just an expert on veterans issues and particularly psychological issues and emotional issues with vets, has referred to PTSD as the Agent Orange of this war.
He has.
And I would be inclined to agree with Steve's assessment.
I agree with that. Yeah. One thing I think we might have a little bit of an advantage here, though, is you're seeing it as the war is still progressing. We're still in that war. Agent Orange, didn't really come to the surface until veterans started becoming ill. Right. 3, 4, 5 years down the line after the war had ended. And of course, Vietnam wound down over a 5-year period. We took 5 years getting out of Vietnam.
Right.
But I think we have an advantage here is you see it now. The troops know it. You know about PTSD. You know about DUs. So this is where we can make awareness now. And maybe we won't have the problems today with Iraq and those things that we had coming out of Vietnam.
You're more optimistic than I am.
Really? Okay.
I think that if anything, we're more at fault now because we do have more of awareness. We do have more knowledge, I think, when it comes to issues that veterans face in Iraq than we did in Vietnam. I think that makes us more culpable because I think the same mistakes are still being made in spite of the fact that we have that knowledge. and we have that experience. You know, they put the number anywhere from 1,600 to 2,100 Iraq and Afghanistan veterans are homeless right now. You know, we've seen this before with the previous generation of veterans. And yet we're failing a new generation of vets. You know, once again, guys are going into the VA. They're having to wait months and months just for their initial appointments and assessments. A lot of them are getting diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder in their initial diagnosis, and then 6 months, a year later, they're being brought back in to be reevaluated to determine if that rating is valid and if they're going to consider to get their benefits. You know, it's despicable. I mean, it really is. It's despicable, and I don't think. I think unfortunately there's this perception from the general, you know, that the general American public has that this country does a good job of providing for and taking care of their vets. But you know, if you look at very recently, you know, the conditions at Walter Reed, which is a flagship hospital, you know, for the military,
right.
And you know, you look at that, it exposes, it should be breaking down this myth that the country does right by their vets. Unfortunately, people are very entrenched into that perception. And it's going to take a lot of work to really let the general public know. But I think the DoD is very well aware. I think the VA is very well aware of the problems that that veterans are facing, and they're not addressing it effectively.
So what you're saying then, Sean, is it looks like we haven't learned enough from Vietnam.
Exactly. I mean, I think what you're seeing is an example of the old saying that those who don't learn from their mistakes are doomed to repeat them. And
right.
And I think what we're in the midst of right now is repeating those mistakes, and you know it's unfortunate because it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, Sean, I couldn't agree more with you on that issue, and it goes back to the American public. September 11th, all the Americans, oh, those bastards! Look what they did to us. Let's get them. They got to pay for this. Well, guess who the cashiers at the checkout stand were? The young men and women in uniform, right? And who falls through the cracks when they come home, when they take that uniform off? Those same young men and women. So, Sean, I'd like to do another part with you. Would you come back?
Oh, absolutely. It'd be my privilege.
I think we got a lot more to talk about.
Thank you.
Not to mention there's a very amazing announcement I would be making about Mr. Sean Hughes. Some news on Mr. Hughes. This is 11 Bravo. See you on part 2 with Sean Hughes.